Good morning. Welcome to the annual briefing for stress. My name is Carissa McKay. I'm one of the health promotion specialists in Edmonton. And the briefing today is going to be taking back control of your personal stress dial. So I'm going to share my screen. We are going to get started. All right. So to begin, the disclaimer is that the presentation that you're about to view is the intellectual property of the Department of National Defence Health Promotion, and any reproduction or transmission of the slides contained in this presentation is strictly forbidden. I'd also like to start with a land acknowledgement. The land we are on, how we came to be here, and what we can do to contribute meaningfully to help move all of us, First Nations, Métis Nations, Inuit, and all the inhabitants of this land forward to a place where we can and do better. Here in Edmonton, we are on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Nakota Sioux. So to start, we need to be able to understand stress, because in order to be able to do anything about anything, we have to have an understanding about it. Otherwise, it's a little bit like putting lipstick on a pig. Looks okay, but really doesn't address the underlying problem that it's still a pig. We need to understand what stress is and how it impacts us, what we need to learn about it generally. And in this briefing, we're going to take a look at how living through a pandemic affected our stress response and what we can learn from that that's going to help us manage stress generally moving forward. Stress is essential. It has kept us alive. It has allowed us to overcome challenges that led to our survival. The old freeze, fight, flight response is our basic defense mechanism to alert us to danger and help us to decide on a course of action. Without it, we would literally not be sitting here today. Stress keeps us motivated. Without stress, even something as simple as the sound of our alarm clocks in the morning or whenever you need to get up wouldn't necessarily give us a reason to get up and do anything. Without that alarm clock, we're going to just want to stay in bed. So that's kind of what stress does for us. We need to work to keep the lights on, to put food on the table. And if that's not an option, the stress of wondering how we're going to make ends meet spurs us to look for work. Knowing that we need to perform when we're working at some predetermined level in order to ensure that the people that we are responsible for are safe or have access to power or are protected from floods, fire, the enemy, or whatever the case may be, is that thing that keeps us going from day to day. Stress is therefore not bad, though it's often viewed through a negative lens. The fact of the matter is, we need it. Stress promotes growth because stress promotes ongoing and continued learning. If we remember anything from the last 20 months or so, it's that we've probably learned more things in that period of time out of necessity than perhaps since we were in school. All the ways we adapted to working and learning remotely allowed us to continue and are still now allowing us to do things that make us be more adaptable, flexible, and at the end of the day, valuable. While obviously not all jobs lent themselves to working from home, we realized that just because things had been happening in a certain way didn't mean that things couldn't change for the better. Change is good. The stress of having to find a different way to do things led to innovations that will now hopefully keep on happening, and that is also a good thing. But I would be remiss if we didn't look at the things that led to the different stresses that we have experienced over the last year and a half. The after effects of COVID-19 are going to be with us for years to come. Some good, some less good. It was stressful when we were all sent home, or depending on what you did, maybe not sent home. The way that people coped with that was very individual. Some people loved it. They were made for social isolation. For others, it was a bit of a death knell. How you functioned likely depended in part on what your nature dictated and partly on what you do for a living. COVID-19 was scary. It was largely unknown. We didn't know exactly how it was transmitted. We needed to shut down in an effort to flatten the curve, stay safe, and buy the time we needed to figure things out. Stress and anxiety were at an all-time high. And many people were choosing things like drinking, gaming, drugs, shopping to cope, none of which help in the long term, and all of which have negative side effects. So depending on the coping strategies that you had, things were, to say the least, a little bit unsettled until we fell into a sort of a holding pattern and we all tried to make the best of a not so great situation. The work from home, therefore, looked probably very different for everybody. Everybody had a different situation. Infanteers had a lot of time on their hands. Maybe they still do. Medical staff, the exact opposite. Support staff, probably the exact opposite. Teachers did not have enough hours in the day to pivot to teaching in a whole new way, whether that was virtually or in the classroom. Parents with kids had to navigate all sorts of schedule juggling as people tested positive, had to isolate, quarantine. They were in class, they were out of class, they were in class. And then the IT folks that made it all possible had their hands full trying to make sure that everyone could do what they needed to do from wherever they were in a way that still maintained the integrity of the systems and networks that they were responsible for. Kitchens were converted to office spaces, makeshift ergonomic setups were created, and we carried on. Then, as people got immunized and restrictions lifted, the transition back to work happened. For some, there was a huge sense of relief as normal returned, but for others, the idea of going back may have been met with concern, hesitation, or reluctance. For people who may have lost a loved one during the at-home height of the pandemic, there was also a sense of loss, of not having been able to be there or do anything. Work has changed. Even as the masks are put away and put back on and the plexiglass shields come down and are put back up, there remains for some an uncertainty, a fear, even with perhaps a bit of a sense of relief, because nothing is really the same. Or is it? Throughout all the phases or stages of the last several months, we will have found ourselves moving along this hopefully by now familiar stress curve, where we see performance impacted by the amount of stress experienced. Although it may seem a little bit too cut and dried because, well, it is. Ideally, where we want to be is what we call the green from the mental health continuum, right? But not all the way in underload. So I'm not really sure why it's green in the picture, because green should actually be in the place where there's optimum stress. What we want is the Goldilocks amount of stress, not too little, not too much, just right. Ironically, even if your trade was one that did not lend itself to working from home, it is possible that you did not feel too little stress at having nothing to do. No schedule, no clear direction, no purpose, no sense of what it is that I'm doing or what should I be doing can be for many people very, very stressful. So in the midst of having nothing to do, it's possible that you could have found yourself in yellow, orange, or even red as coping and dealing with the unknown and a sense of not contributing in a meaningful way may have started taking its toll. The thing with stress is that it is largely a very individual reaction. We can all face the exact same situation and respond to it very differently. Making generalizations or judging ourselves or comparing ourselves about how we should deal with a stressor or adversity is therefore often not very helpful, because we really can't determine how a person will respond or what the impact will be. Of course, there are things that we can do to mitigate some of the more negative outcomes, but judging ourselves or others on how we're doing can really just make things worse. Because let's face it, it was a bit of a long and at times painful learning curve. We felt that we needed to be able to immediately pivot and keep on doing what we used to do in a whole new way, but just as well as we used to do the things that we had years of practice doing. And that wasn't realistic. Nobody got on their bikes for the first time and did a road race. The day you decided to take up running, you didn't do a marathon. It took time, effort, and yes, practice before you got to that point. And maybe you're still not even there. We didn't have that luxury when we started doing things differently at the beginning of the pandemic. We just did the best we could. And our brains kept it up for as long as possible. But after about the 6-week mark, the survival crisis mode that we were in, though nowhere near being over, was our brain's breaking point, and it was screaming for a return to normal. But that wasn't possible. So we kept on going. Mistakes were made. Stress remained high even as we figured things out, learned new things, and tried to settle into something totally different for the long haul. And things kept changing, fluctuating, vacillating, and the uncertainty, the lack of consistent information amidst the divisiveness that was already gripping the world only added a whole nother layer of challenge to an already challenging situation. But we did learn new things, and we did figure out a way forward, despite roadblocks and detours and flat tires and occasionally running out of gas. We made it because we had coping mechanisms that we were able to tap into, whether that was compartmentalizing, finding a way to debrief between the kitchen and the living room or whatever space you were working out of, from home to the office, finding new ways to de-stress, listening to music, working out in the garage or the basement, or going for many, many, many walks with your dog. Those coping strategies that were either old standbys or perhaps newly developed activities are what helped us to deal with the stressors that we were all facing and continue to face, each in our own way. Because the reality is that despite the fact that hopefully the worst of this pandemic is behind us, there remains a whole host of other challenges that we will be needing to sort out institutionally, organizationally, locally, nationally, and globally. Having survived, and in some cases thrived, though certainly not every day, we can now carry on and take those things that we experienced, things that we learned, and apply them in ways that will help us to do our jobs better, and hopefully in some capacity, help make the world better. We need to embrace stress, regardless of what is going on, because stress is how we live. Dealing with stress is what we do. We persevere, we carry on, we push forward. In our old normal, back in the good old days, it might have just simply been dealing with traffic. Some of us dealt with that with more grace than others. We all tackled our job challenges and pushed ourselves to different limits. We tried to do things to prove to ourselves that we could overcome fears of heights, of water, of failure. And for most of the time, for most of us, hopefully, we largely succeeded. During the pandemic, we faced the stress of perhaps not finding what we needed at the grocery store, realizing that maybe all those crackerjack doomsday preppers might have been onto something. We learned to fight against the very thing that helped us to survive as a species, each other, by social distancing. Most people can probably by now exactly approximate 6 feet without even thinking about it. We saw businesses and organizations close, many permanently. Family members might have been among those whose employment was affected, friends among those whose businesses were shuttered. That stress was different than anything that anyone has likely experienced. And it's been going on for a long, long time, much longer than we have the capacity to endure. And yet we largely succeeded. And the new normal, post-vaccine, where people are proud to say that they've had their 2 jabs or not, and how to navigate that. Will the hand washing continue? Will that innate 6 feet immediately shrink back to whatever your personal bubble was before? It's hard to say. We're back to work in some capacity, hybrid or back to the old ways. For many, there is a sense of relief as they can resume their workaday routines. Sadness for others as they say goodbye to their makeshift office spaces. Excitement as things reopen, but trepidation as we see what's happening when we open too soon and then have to pivot and shut things back down, and the frustration that that creates. We have to embrace all these stressors and continue to learn from them, because regardless of what happens, there will be another crisis. There will be some other thing that pushes us to our limits. That stress is what is driving us forward to continue to find new solutions and new ways of doing things. And that's a good thing. Whether as an organization looking to improve disaster response protocols, or even just doing things a little bit differently to make sure that your people are okay. Or as individuals working to develop skills and tools for our stress management toolboxes that will keep us in check when things start to go sideways, as they invariably will. So what have you learned? There's probably been many lessons along the way that maybe people have had a chance to stop and think about, or maybe there's just been so many things that just keep on coming that people haven't had an opportunity to pause and reflect. What can you do better now? Are you better able to go with the flow? Do you find yourself better able to think outside the box? Do you see things more as challenges and opportunities as opposed to barriers or obstacles? Or is that how you always did things? And that's what's exactly been helping you to get through and cope. If I was there in person, I would ask you to put up your hands and ask the question, who here has learned something over the last year and a bit? I'm hoping that everybody will have learned something. Were they things that you were looking to learn, or were they things that you found you had to learn in order to keep going, stay relevant, or stay connected? There are a lot of things that we learned of which we should be immensely proud. And it's important to think about that. That's what keeps us going too, the successes, and hopefully some of the thanks that may have happened along the way as well, because acknowledgement is a powerful, motivating tool for everybody. We all need that sometimes. But perhaps the two questions that are the most important are really those last two. What have you discovered that are your real priorities? What really matters to you? What do you absolutely, without a doubt, know is key to your happiness, your sanity, your very being? And what really doesn't matter all that much? Is what matters people? Is it the friends and family and even acquaintances that maybe you took for granted at being able to see on a regular basis that you couldn't? For local businesses, we owe a great debt of gratitude because for many of us, that was where we got the things that we needed when we couldn't get the stuff at the big box stores. Priorities that may have shifted and really opened our eyes to what's important, those are the things that we need to take steps to protect in the event that we have to do this again. Because the reality is that's largely a question of not if, but when. So these lessons learned are key to getting us ready and making sure that we take steps to protect those things in the future. So I'd like to ask, as we get about to the halfway point, for you to think about, how are you doing now? We asked a similar question last year, and a very common answer was that for a lot of us, it was a bit of a dumpster fire. So think about it. How are you doing? You don't have to answer out loud unless you want to let the dog know, but you really need to listen to the answer that you give yourself, because that's going to determine the steps that you need to take to either keep on sailing or to try to figure out where you lost that paddle along the way. So how we move forward from here, learning from our recent experiences in terms of stress management, is really the key to being successful regardless of what life happens to throw your way. The path might be a bit overgrown in places, it might feel a bit rickety, but it is a way forward and we have to keep going. And what's as important is that we have the support from leadership, from the organization to be able to do that. This is not something that can only fall to an individual's personal responsibility. We all have a role in working towards this path moving forward. We need to remember the things that we can control, not other people, not other places, not events, just ourselves, our responses, our reactions, our choices. We need to remember the things that help us to feel better. We need to remember our coping strategies. What do you do that helps you to feel better? In the midst of an absolute gong show, what do you do to help you to feel better? Not just in the moment, but also in the long term. What choices do you make consciously to deal with stressors, acknowledge them, and then deal with them in ways that don't have longer term negative side effects? Not picking fights with your coworkers, not drinking, smoking, or binge eating, not showing up for work. What are the strategies that you use to do well? The coping strategies that we're going to look at are the big, broad stroke things that help us to stay on that overgrown and rickety path. We might not always be flourishing or thriving, but we are surviving, though that's not really the goal. Survival gets us to a place where we can hopefully figure out ways to flourish and thrive, because we can't be at the top of that stress curve forever. Ideally, we're going to be moving fluidly back and forth between pretty awesome and fair to middling most of the time. We should aim for the peaks of those mountains, but be satisfied if we almost make it to the top most of the time. So what are these broad stroke coping strategies? The first one is support and community. As we learned, when you don't have the ability to lean on the people in your community, whatever that is, work, neighborhood, family, friends, it's tough to go it alone when the going gets tough. So many people told me that the one thing that they were going to do, and it was safe to do so again, was to hug people. Now, it's fair to say that you might not all be huggers, but the idea that if you could hug, if you wanted to, and when it was appropriate, the people that you wanted to hug without fear for their or your safety, that's pretty liberating. And as a hugger, that's pretty awesome. We need people. Even introverts need people, albeit on a different scale from the extroverts. We need support. We need, at the end of the day, each other. We need to know that someone has our back. And even if it is the work people that you don't get to choose, it's important to have that relationship with them, that you can rely on one another, that you do have each other's back when the going gets tough, that there isn't a fear that you're going to get thrown under that bus. We need to spend or we tend to spend more time at work than with our family. So it's important that support and community at work is really there. That sense of community and belonging at work is critical. But it takes work to develop. On a little bit more of an individual perspective, we also know this. We talk about this all the time, but we don't always do it because execution is so very often the hardest part of these things. We need to eat well. That goes without saying. And it also goes without saying that that looks different for everyone. There is not really one perfect way to eat. Vegetables are not optional though, and a purely carnivorous diet is not a thing. At the end of the day, the balanced plate is about as good of a goal as there ever was. But whatever you do to feel energized and like you're unstoppable from the perspective of what you're eating is probably a good starting point. There is no one magic food group, and none of them need to be eliminated. It's really about balance and a little bit of common sense. Make sure that water is available and consumed consistently. Our performance actually declines more quickly when we're dehydrated than as a result of poor eating habits. So drink water and stay hydrated. And of course, be as active as you can doing the things that you enjoy as much of the time as possible. We don't all love running, that's the simple truth, but sadly, it's also a go-to. So do what you can to prepare to minimize the risk of injury and then get through it. When you do get to decide, choose the things that make you happy and feel good to balance that out. Maybe it involves moving out of a moving boat, maybe it doesn't. Do whatever you want to do, that's you, whatever floats your boat. The most important thing though is the last thing. Those two previous things really contribute to this last one, which is quality sleep. Getting enough sleep means that you will be both mentally and physically rested so that you make good choices with respect to eating and to making sure that you're drinking water and being active, as well as every other decision that you have to make over the course of the day. It's a positive feedback loop, which also increases your ability to manage stress. Second, third, find ways to grow, push yourself, challenge yourself to be better, stronger, fitter, faster, in whatever capacity. Do things that motivate you and get you excited. Do things that you suck at. It doesn't have to be just physically either. Take a course, learn a new skill, perhaps not even one related to your job. Because if you aren't learning, you're dying. So keep your mind activated and stay sharp. New skills are never a waste of time. Find ways to connect with nature. Maybe it's not in Thailand with small children walking through a city park, but right here in your own backyard. Wherever you call home, there are likely trails, paths, or places not too far away that let you connect with the world outside the concrete jungle. Forest bathing is not some airy-fairy thing for yogis in Tibet. It's a good thing for all of us to do, for all of us to go where things are quiet, natural, and away from electronic interruptions. And remember that we all long to belong, regardless of your trade, the color of your skin, your orientation, or anything else. We all need to work to create an inclusive environment. We all need to treat each other with respect and dignity. These aren't optional. There might be those you disagree with or don't get along with. We don't have to like everyone, but we need to be respectful and courteous. At the end of the day, that allows us all to win. So how are we going to get to the middle of that mountain while always keeping our eyes on the top of those snowy peaks? Well, we need to continue to aim to be the best we can. We need to let others teach us. We need to be okay with learning and not expecting ourselves to know everything. We all have things to learn and we all have things to teach. And we need to be able to see the difference and accept where we are with both of those. Again, regardless of whether you're in a leadership position or not, we all can learn from those around us. And we need to be okay with listening. Part of stress management is knowing your limits, setting boundaries, creating a balance of what you have to do with what you would like to do, all work and no play and all of that. Practice makes progress. One bullet hitting the bullseye once doesn't make you a sharpshooter. You have to expend a lot of rounds to get to a place where you hit that bullseye consistently. So practice meditation, yoga, and breathing. Practice gratitude and appreciation. Practice eating well, cooking more often, drinking water regularly, being active daily. Practice listening to the people who you are responsible for. Practice thinking that maybe there's a different or better way of doing things. because those are all things that need to happen on an ongoing basis to support our well-being collectively and individually. And that will help us all to be more resilient to the stressors that we know are going to come our way. Compassion is so key in building community, in building relationships, in finding new perspective. So we need to work on that. Find ways to help to build compassion. When you walk a mile in someone else's shoes, you learn that you may not know everything there is about being human, and you will see and appreciate the power of the human spirit in the face of adversity. And you will perhaps better appreciate those things that you take for granted. That new perspective, that empathy with what others are experiencing, helps to strengthen your resilience as you identify the things that you have available to deal with stress, so that you can make a difference for the others as well as yourself, and do things differently if that's what it takes. Expect that things are going to go wrong. When you don't have access to a lot of resources, you learn to problem solve. Learning how to think on the fly, or how to improvise, or how to ask for help when maybe you don't have the necessary tools can not only help you deal with the stressor in a positive way, but model to others how that is an acceptable way to cope with stress or problems that we can't figure out or face on our own. Resourcefulness is good. Learning to access resources is better. And role modeling that is better yet. In terms of the resources, we always like to just share the things that we hope everybody is familiar with. The CIFMAP program, the Employee Assistance Program, utilizing your local MFRCs, the health units in the communities where you live, the OSIS Peer Support Coordinator for folks who have literally walked in your shoes and can share their experiences to help you deal with whatever might be going on for you, as well as the traditional resources that we have. And we're working on a wallet card, but wherever you might find yourself, check with your location to see if they've got them available to you so that you have an easy, handy resource. Check with your friendly neighborhood health promotion office to see if they exist there, and check back with us soon to see if ours are ready, because they are in the works. So when it comes to stress management in the military, one of the things that we have seen over the years is the power that comes from supporting one another. It's for good reason that in our Stress Take Charge course and in our mental fitness and suicide awareness course, we talk about esprit de corps, camaraderie, and unit cohesion, and consider those to be incredibly important protective mechanisms. But they need to be worked on. They need to be fostered. They need to be built and supported. While there are challenges to working together with a mixed and varied group of individuals, the great thing about working together is that at the end of the day, everyone benefits from that. It doesn't come without effort. It doesn't come without a little bit of creativity, but doing all of the things that help to grow those aspects will really pay significant dividends. Always be on the lookout for opportunities, whether that's for professional development, personal growth, or as ways to promote inclusion, such as the Positive Spaces Ambassador Program, or ways to support one another as through the Sentinel Program. Keeping an eye out for those means that you're not only looking at ways that you can contribute meaningfully to the group, but that will also in the end help to strengthen the relationships that you yourself might end up relying on at some point. Stress is always going to be a part of life and a part of work. It's up to us how we choose to let that influence us. We can turn it into something negative that we try to avoid, or that we deem as an inescapable part of our existence, or we can work to create a community that works toward a common goal or cause collectively with an eye towards everybody's well-being. That makes the most of the resources that are available, and that is something that we are all proud to be a part of. It's like that old saying, the strength of one and then the power of many. The choice is yours. So if you have any questions or you would like to set anything else up virtually or in person, do feel free to get in touch by phone or email. If you would like to be a unit health promotion rep in your unit and share health promotion related news, information, set up challenges, and work with us to help to create on the ground opportunities for making things better within your workplace, call us up. We would love to work with you. If you'd like to learn more about our core areas, we've got podcasts, webinars, video tutorials, newsletters, and more on our CAF Connection page. And if you would like more than cat memes in your social media, like and follow us for inspiring tips, hot off the press releases, and generally awesome content to help you be your best self. Thank you so much for your attention. We wish you the best of the rest of your day. And I'm just going to quit sharing. And hope that you have a great rest of your 2021. And I look forward to 2022 being even better. Take care, everybody. Thanks.